And as I mentioned, and as you mentioned as well, Arlene, I'm Therese Lilliebladh, working as a requirements manager for IKEA. And I'm working at our headquarters called IKEA of Sweden, which is the IKEA unit where we do all the product development for our global product range. And this is also where we have the functions steering the supply of our products from our around 1,000 suppliers. And I'm leading the team who are responsible for developing the chemical requirements on our products and in our supply chain. And I am also responsible for our global chemical strategy, which I will touch a bit on as well. But I will, however, focus a bit on how we are working with the class concept and have been working on it for quite some time now. I will mention a few examples of that. I will share some best practices, some learnings, some challenges. And then in the end, I will focus a bit on PFAS and what we have been doing and are doing within that field. So first of all, I always try to mention a bit about our business idea, which is to create a better everyday life for the many people. And that, of course, includes developing products with care for future generations and for the planet as well. And when we develop our products, we do it according to something that we call democratic design. And it's about taking into consideration various aspects. Because our products, they should have a good form, a good function, good quality. They should be available at good and low prices, and they should be sustainable and therefore free from harmful chemicals. And all these aspects are of equal importance as we see it. Back in 2016, we launched our chemical strategy, which is a sub-strategy to our sustainability strategy called People and Planet Positive, which you all can find online. And we truly believe that all people have the right to safe and healthy products that are free from harmful chemicals. And everyone who listens today, we know that many chemicals are safe to use, but there are many who are harmful, and that is why we need to handle chemicals in a responsible way. In our chemical strategy, we have identified 5 so-called strategic objectives that we think will help us to continue to produce products that are safe and healthy to use for our customers and also safe to produce. It's about increased information about the chemical content in our products. It's about doing risk assessment on all materials used in our products. It's about phasing out harmful substances and materials. And use suppliers that share our values on chemical safety and compliance, and also to increase awareness about or among coworkers, consumers, and other key stakeholders about our work on chemicals. The basis for our requirements are various regulations from all over the world, various standards, but also different type of scientific reports, and also customer expectations. And when developing our chemical requirements, we take into consideration both customer health and safety, but also working environment and the outside environment. And to the left, you can see some examples of our requirement documents that, among other information and other requirements, contains our restricted substance lists. I think we have around 40 of those requirement documents only for chemicals today. And we try to, as often as possible, use the class approach or the class concept when we ban or restrict chemicals in our products and in our supply chain, as we truly believe that it's an efficient way of working and it prevents us from doing regrettable substitutions. And a bit later on, I will come back to some example of how we use a class approach. But before that, I would like to mention something about phase-out considerations that we are doing when we want to phase out a group of substances in our products. First of all, we ask ourselves, is the substance really needed? And is the particular property that the substance provides, is it really necessary? Is it needed? Then we ask ourselves, are there alternative materials where we do not need to add the particular chemical or group of chemicals? And if the answer is no, then we look into alternative substances. And then, of course, it's always important to look into whether or not those alternatives really are safer and what data is available. And then we look into the risks and the hazards with those before we make a decision. And then if we can't find any safer alternatives, we sometimes have to ask ourselves, is it worth it to keep using this group of chemicals? And sometimes the answer is no. And I will later on mention one example of that as well. Here we have one example of when we are using the class concept. It's phthalates that we banned. We banned the whole group of phthalates in children products, including toys, already back in 2006. And then in food contact products, specifically back in 2009. And then for the rest of the product range, we have a ban for all phthalates that are classified as carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reprotoxic, category 1A and 1B, according to the European system, and also phthalates that are substances of very high concern, and also phthalates that are listed on the California Proposition 65 list. What is also very important is to look into what is being used instead. So therefore, we have requirements in place saying that when a supplier or sub-supplier is adding another type of plasticizer or softener, they need to inform us about what they plan to use, and we need to give a go-ahead before they can use that. Another example of where we are using the class concept is for halogenated flame retardants. And here we banned the remaining use of that in US back in 2015. And we could do that when we implemented a so-called fire barrier or an interliner. And we added that into all upholstered furniture. And by that, we could remove the remaining use of halogenated flame retardants in the US furniture. And already since before, we had since long banned the brominated ones. But it felt really good to remove also the chlorinated ones. And then I couldn't resist. Yeah, thanks. And I couldn't resist to mention also biocides or antimicrobials, as we were touching upon that this Monday evening. And here we have a ban on biocides added to impart properties of final product. There are, of course, preservatives used in coatings and so forth to secure a shelf life, but we don't add any ones to impart the properties of the final product. There are a few exceptions given, but they are very few. And here I would also like to share that we had some experience a few years ago. We looked into the quality and the molding process on treated outdoor wooden furniture and compared it to the non-treated ones. And surprisingly, there were actually no difference. So since then, we have removed almost all use of biocides also on the outdoor wooden furniture. So that shows a bit about the importance of actually looking into the efficacy and ask ourselves, is it really needed? And here the answer was no. And then we move into PFAS. And here we have banned the whole group of PFAS in textiles since 2015. Already 2009, we banned PFOA, PFOS, PFOSA and their derivatives. In 2012, we decided not to allow any PFAS treatment on our sofa covers. And then back in 2015, we removed PFAS from shower curtains, umbrellas and ponchos, as we realized that only water repellency was needed here. So it was unnecessary to use them. And then inspired by this toxics reduction retreat, we 2015 made the decision to phase out the remaining use of PFAS. And at that time, we used it in a tablecloth and in meter fabric. And here we actually couldn't find any good alternatives to get the dirt and soil repellency. And we therefore took the decision to completely remove these product types from all markets, even if it was a quite lucrative business for us, because we simply didn't think that it was worth it. So that is one example of what companies can do.
2 minutes.
Thank you. I would, last but not least, also share another learning we had, because related to single-use plastics, a lot of companies have been trying to remove it, for example, in food disposables. And we realized that very often that has resulted in use of very so-called natural materials, for example, bagasse, another paper-like material. And instead of using plastic to cover those materials, what do they use? PFAS to get the fat repellency, which is very unfortunate. And here we actually contacted one of the biggest European suppliers of food disposables. And it turned out that not that many companies request alternatives, so they haven't been working that much on it. And that was a huge shock for me. And that shows the importance of big companies, including IKEA, the importance of asking for safer alternatives and be very strict on that. So when we found out, we actually stopped the production of some products that were in the pipeline. And we decided that until we have a safer alternative, we will allow a thin layer of polyethylene on top of the paper or bagasse material, as we truly believe that that is way more sustainable than adding PFAS into the material. So that is one learning as well. And last but also not least, I like to refer to the founder of IKEA, Ingvar Kamprad. He says that most things still remain to be done, a glorious future. And that, I think, represents quite well what we have in front of us. There are still a lot of things to do. So thanks.